Welcome back to Cards and Comics. Today I've got part 2 of my predictions and goals for 2022 video, and I'm going to be focused on my collection goals for 2022, which includes both cards and comics. So we'll get right into it. Goal number 1, Willie Mays. So, I've mentioned Willie Mays in almost all my vintage videos, and I did a whole video on how Willie Mays cards are going to double in value, um, within the year. And so I've already kind of put my, Willie Mays love out there. And it all comes from the fact that, I don't have a lot of Willie Mays cards from the 50s. And so that really kind of bugs me because I had a lot of time to be able to go and get those cards. And I just never did. So it's just really something I feel like is a big hole in my collection. So, my focus is going to be on the 50s cards, right? So I only have, I think, 2 or 3 of his 50s cards. Probably my best one I have is the 57 PSA 8. And so that's a great Willie Mays card, right? But, for me collecting as long as I have and really focus on vintage, it's really kind of a mystery why I don't have more. And so I think I should correct that in 2022. So I'll be looking for graded 7 or above, but I will also really look at, crossing over some SGC cards. If I can find, them at a good price point and the ability to cross them over and hopefully get either the same grade or a bump as a way to kind of get a cheaper buy-in and be able to still get the grades I want. So we'll see if I can do that. There's no guarantees out there, but I'm hoping to get at least 1 or 2 50s Mays this year. And I don't have, I'm not looking to complete my whole 50s runs because obviously that's very expensive, but getting a few of them this year would be great. The good thing to look at is, I talked about in my predictions for 2022 that these on-card autos of these really, famous and the greatest of all time players in all sports are going to go way up. I think of Jim Brown and Willie Mays and the deceased guys like Ted Williams and Mickey Mantle. The on-card pack-pulled cards from major card companies are going to be what people want, and they're going to really pay attention to the auto, right? So, Willie Mays has a really tough time because a lot of his autographs are smeared and are in poor condition, right? And so I really like to get more and more on-card autos of Willie Mays where the auto is a 10 or it's a really nice auto and on a card that's very nice. And again, on-card versus sticker is a big deal, especially for players that had cards made in the 2000s, which a lot of them end up being on sticker versus on-card in the 90s. Goal number 2. So I'm a Spider-Man collector. I really haven't showed off my Spider-Man set because I feel like it's very incomplete. Like I'm missing tons and tons of the early books, and so I only have one issue from issues 1 through 10, right? And so I really want to focus on 1 through 10 because I only have issue number 4, and it really bugs me because this has been a goal of mine for years is to collect the first 300 issues of Spider-Man. And I've done, obviously, I have some of the cool books. I have 129, I have 50, and that's great. But, missing the first 10 is tough, especially after, the new movie came out and a lot of the books just went nuclear again. So, again, I feel like I wasted some time not buying these earlier. So, again, my typical grade for these kind of books would be, 3 to 5. But with prices today, I'm going to be probably a lot closer to that 3. And then the second book I want to talk about is, the annual number 1, which is the first appearance of, the Sinister Six as a team. I'd love to get that in a 5 or higher. That book is insanely hard to find in the wild in good shape. They're usually, because they're a thicker book, they're just super damaged. The spine is split. The cover is detached. The staples are popped or missing or been replaced. It's just that book is really tough. So, I'm hoping to find one. I would love to get one that's a 5 or better. Number 3, for for 2022, I talk a lot about King Griffey Jr. Especially in if you see my videos where I'm going through, collections, and getting, mail days and talking about 90s cards. I usually focus on King Griffey Jr. because he's the one that I've been collecting the longest, and the one thing that I really, the one player I really spent the most time, researching and trying to understand what his good cards are and rare cards are. In fact, I did a whole video on every one of his 90s refractors and which are the most expensive, or not expensive, but which are the rarer to find in different grades, and which ones have the best value in terms of grade versus price. So I spent a lot of time on his cards, and here's some cards that I feel like I want to get in 2022, which is moving on from just refractors into some of the cooler just die cut inserts like the Flair Showcase Hot Gloves, some more autos, right? So again, focus is always going to be on the pre-2000 cards because Mariners jersey Griffey cards are always a premium and what collectors are going after more often than not. And again, inserts, autos, and number cards are always premium, and on-card autos from the 90s. And Griffey doesn't have as many autos from the 90s as you would think in a Mariners uniform. And so it's not as big a list as you would think. A lot of his autos came in a Reds uniform. And again, 90s refractors, so I don't have like the embossed refractors. I don't have the 94 refractor, so I'm missing some of the bigger ones. Obviously, that's something I want to look at trying to get in 2022. And what's really sad is I used to actually own this Mantle Griffey card auto, and I sold it in 2018 as part of a big collection. It's how I got my 53 Mantle and my 55 Clemente all came with me selling some cards that were more modern, and this is one of them, and I pretty much regret it now. So I'm hoping that I can replace it in the future, but who knows? It's very tough. Goal number 4, and so this is kind of my big comic book goals of the year. Obviously besides Spider-Man is keep adding to my Alex Schomburg and LB Cole Golden Age comic book collections, right? Focus is on adding 2 to 3 Schomburg timely books. So getting his non-timely books, his, there's a few key, Wonder Comics and Startling Comics, but, which are mostly good girl art books, those are expensive, or if they're World War II focused, right? And those are great. But his, timely books, all select, Captain America books, Human Torch, Submariner books, those have, not only the iconic covers that a lot of people associate with Schomburg, but the value because they're obviously pre-Marvel books and have characters that are still relevant today. Puts them over the top in terms of price and rarity in terms of on the market, meaning that a lot of people are going for those books as well. Very competitive. With LB Cole and Schomburg both is I've had a ton of books I've gotten raw in the last 3 to 4 years because I haven't graded any comic books in a while, and so I've got a backlog of their books I need to probably send in to get graded. And so I have about 25 to 30 raw books I need to go through and see what's good enough to grade. And then for LB Cole, the big thing here is, really focusing on his sci-fi and horror books. So many, types of books that I really feel like, or genres he was in that, from a collector's perspective, his horror and sci-fi books are definitely where I want to try to focus on. Now, goal number 5, again, mentioning back to the refractors of 2015 and beyond, or prior, is this idea of football goats. And I mentioned it in my predictions. I think these will continue to go up, but it's such a wide net of cards that are out there. You can find cards, inserts, base cards, on and on that are out there for these players, and they're all really cool. They all, to me, are from a time period that I love in terms of football card collecting. And in fact, it's kind of like I'm very sad that there's no more Top Scrum. That was my favorite set of all time. But I can still collect the cards that exist. And one of the focuses I'll have when I go and buy these cards is to get them in the original team uniform. So just like with Griffey, buying Mariner cards, for Peyton Manning, I want to focus on Indianapolis Coat cards. Brett Favre, I want him in a Packers uni. For Jerry Rice, I want him in a San Francisco uniform. It's just those are how people remember them as a player, and the cards are always more popular and easier to sell if I want to move them or trade them. So that's going to be the focus. And last but certainly not least is my Indigenous Collection. This is something that I have been putting together for a few years, and I'm going to make it more of a focus. And so what am I talking about here? Well, I'm talking about my Native American sports cards and comic and non-sports card collection that I've been working on. And so I've got four main focuses. So first is the 1933 Gaudi Indian gum set. It's a beautiful set with some really colorful cards and some pretty good short prints as well. There isn't what I consider to be a huge key, maybe the Geronimo card or the maybe the Custer card. Maybe some of those cards are considered to be keys, but in reality, the set itself is pretty stable in pricing right now, and so to pick them up isn't really that hard, and especially if you're okay with getting grades between 4 and 6. So it's kind of a fun thing to pick up a few cards here and there. Also, the flavor text in the back of the cards are great, and it does give a good snapshot into the 1930s and how the Native Americans in that time period thought of that part of history. So next up is Marvel's character Echo, which is in the new Hawkeye series, and she's a very interesting character. She first appeared in Daredevil, and she has a lot of great covers, such as this David Mack cover here on this page. But she also has a lot of other variants, and even her first appearances covers are very, very cool. Marvel has also done, for Native American Heritage Month, a whole slew of covers for that as well, and so those are very fun to pick up as well, and some of them are pretty cheap, but they're all really cool in my opinion. They did a great job in those. So next up is my Chief Bender collection, and this is the only collection I've really showcased. I did a video on my Chief Bender collection. In all honesty, I haven't really updated it much since that video, so unfortunately I just haven't been able to pick up a lot of Chief Benders, and the main reason is because my Chief Bender collection is a little more advanced to the point where the cards I need are a lot more rare and a lot more expensive, and I've just not been as focused on it because again, they're hard to find, and the ones I do need are pretty pricey, and the grades that I kind of like to collect don't come up that often. So but I'm gonna really try to get a few Benders this year, and one of them I'm definitely looking at getting is this Rochester Baking card, which is I think one of the most beautiful Chief Bender cards ever made. And then last but certainly not least is Golden Age comic books with Native American covers. And there has been a lot of great cover artists. Two that come to mind right off the bat is L.B. Cole and Frank Frazetta did a lot of Native American covers. L.B. Cole did a really awesome cover of the Native American pilots in World War II. Which is a really cool cover, and and then the covers themselves generally fall into two classes. One of them is sort of a stereotypical, almost racist kind of cover tropes of Native Americans, and the other one, which is kind of like what I'm showing here on this Target comic cover, The other one is more of a positive image for Native Americans, and and there's been great depictions of Native Americans in comics before. In fact, I think Sergeant Rock, there was a pilot that was part of his company that was featured in a lot of his comics, and so that's a cool character. And in fact, I have the first appearance. There's a lot of cool characters out there that to collect. And a good thing about this is, again, not a lot of these comic books are expensive because a lot of them are westerns, and western comic books generally are pretty cheap compared to horror and superhero comics. So again, this is a collection that I'm from Oklahoma originally. I'm Native American. Obviously my parents and grandparents are Native American, and that really kind of makes it more personal and more fun to collect because, again, not a lot of this material is super expensive. Some of it is, some of it isn't, but it's a great way to continue to collect without having to spend a ton of money. So there it is. That's my top 6 goals for the year. I would love to hear everyone else's goals and what they're going to be collecting this year. And I hope to hear from you, and let me know what you think about my goals. And I'll see you next time on Cards and Comics. Thank you.